and welcome to the 27th episode of Historians in Conversation, podcast hosted by the University of Lodz in Poland. My name is Michael Green, and today my guest is Professor Selim Karahasanoğlu from the Medeniyet University in Istanbul. The conversation today will be revolving around Selim's interest in history, his family, which has long roots in the region where he was born, and also about Turkish Academy. I invite you to listen to this episode and I hope that you enjoy our conversation. Hello Selim and welcome to my podcast. I'm extremely happy to have the opportunity to talk to you. I know your work for quite some time and it is also my pleasure to have finally a scholar from Turkey that will talk to us not only about his life but also about the way that history is studied in Turkey. So welcome and yeah.
Hello, Mikhail. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you. I always start the conversation with asking about one's childhood, and this time it will not be different. Could you tell me a little bit about your family? Where do you come from? Where were you born?
Yeah, I was born in the summer of 1980 in Maçka. It's a district in the city of Trabzon. Up in the north of Turkey, along the Black Sea coast. Maçka is actually a historically significant place. There is a well-known site there called the Sümela Monastery. It was built in the 4th century, and it's a Greek Orthodox monastery. What makes it special is its striking architecture. It's built right into this side of a mountainside. It attracts a lot of tourists from all around the world. Maçka is also lucky in another sense. It has caught the attention of some important historians. Three history professors, Anthony Breyer, Keith Lowry, and Ronald Jennings, have written academic articles on the Byzantine and Ottoman history of the area. Breyer studied Maçka during the Byzantine period. Lowry focused on it using Ottoman tax registers, and Jennings looked at Ottoman Maçka through court records. So, since we started talking about my childhood and where I was born, I feel I should mention a few names that were important to the cultural and intellectual life of this small town. First and foremost, I have to mention the poet and painter Bedri Rahmi Eyüboğlu, who passed away in 1975. Another member of the same family is Bedri Rahmi's older brother, the literary figure Sabahattin Eyüboğlu, who passed away in 1973. So both brothers studied in Paris. Sabahattin is especially known for his translations from French into Turkish. And another member of the same family is Sabahattin and Bedri Rahmi's younger sister, Mualla Eyüboğlu, who passed away in 2009. She was one of the first female architects in Turkey. So this family, the Eyüboğlu family, holds a really important place in the political, economic, and cultural history of Maçka. Politically and economically, they were significant because they were the leading family in our region during the Ottoman times. In the early years of my academic career, I thought that, I wasn't particularly interested in studying my own region. I saw that kind of research as local, and I thought just because I was born there, that doesn't mean I have to study the history of Trabzon. But around the time I finished university, I met historian Hanefi Bostan, who was a friend of my older brother. He told me, come to Marmara University and let's work on Trabzon together. But honestly, it didn't sound that appealing to me back then. I wanted to do something more broad, something that would speak to wider audiences, not something local. After finishing my PhD, my uncle, who is a businessman living in Istanbul, not an academic, but very curious about these things, pushed me to do something related to our region. He actually went to the Ottoman archives himself, obtained the census register for Machka, and handed it to me. As I started reading through, I was stunned to find that the very first name recorded was Eyüboğlu Osman Ağa, a local notable, that is Ayan in Turkish, of Machka. I was genuinely surprised. I had grown up there, become a historian, even had friends from the Eyüboğlu family, but I had no idea that they had such a deep-rooted historical role in the region. So the discovery led me to start researching the family. I visited Hüket Eyüboğlu, the daughter-in-law of Bedri Rahmi, at her home in Kalamış. She generously gave me unpublished memoirs written by Eyüpzade Mehmet Hamdi, a tax collector and lawyer, and the grandfather of Bedri Rahmi Eyüboğlu. And that's how I ended up beginning academic work on one of the key families of our region. I even had one of my students write a thesis based on those memoirs and the broader history of the Eyüboğlu family. Where does Karahasanoğlu family fit into this picture? When I was in Istanbul doing archival research for my PhD dissertation, a book came out titled Karahasanoğlu Family History. It was written by Cengiz Karahasanoğlu. I immediately went to the press and bought the book, then read it right away. It was a very valuable and pioneering piece of research. However, it didn't truly satisfy my curiosity about my own family, because Cengiz Karahasanoğlu focused only on the branch of the family in Tirebolu, a district in the city of Giresun on the Black Sea coast, which is a neighboring city to Trabzon. It should be the same family since they moved from Machka to Giresun. At this point, my uncle again played a role in connecting my family history to my academic interests. He went to the archives, got the 1835 census record for Machka, and at this time he visited the Meshihat archive, the archive of the head of the religious clergy. There he obtained the personal file of Karahasanoğlu Mehmet Ali Efendi, who lived from 1852 to 1914. I read the documents in the file. Karahasanoğlu Mehmet Ali Efendi talks about himself in the first person, and I published an article about him in a journal by Ege University in Izmir. Mehmet Ali Efendi was a preacher at the Bayezid Mosque and Yeni Cami in Eminönü, Istanbul, but then for some reason he came back to Machka. Later on, Mehmet Ali Efendi became the Mufti of Machka, the head of the religious clergy. The process that led to him becoming Mufti was quite eventful. This is where he would have an encounter with the Eyüboğlu family. In a hard-fought election, Mehmet Ali Efendi would rise above the competition and become Mufti from 1911 to 1914. So the Karahasanoğlu family was a prominent one in Machka. I was really good at reading poems, so during national holidays, I was always chosen to read poems representing my primary school. The teacher holding the microphone, I remember, was Cabbar Karahasanoğlu, my father's cousin. We would gather in the center of Machka for the national holidays, and the mayor would come to speak to the people. His name was Neşat Karahasanoğlu. So for me as a child, it felt like my surname was everywhere. Neşat Karahasanoğlu was the mayor of Machka for 16 years, including during my childhood. And his father, Hafız Fehmi Karahasanoğlu, was also an important figure. He was Machka's first mayor, appointed in 1920. Haydar Karahasanoğlu was the head teacher and principal of Machka Primary School, Machka Merkez Zükür İlk Mektebi, which is for boys in the early years of the Republic. Ömer Hikmet Karahasanoğlu is a name I should mention when talking about my family. He was the son of Karahasanoğlu Mehmet Ali Efendi. Ömer Hikmet played an important role in the preparation of compilation dictionary. Derleme sözlüğü in Turkish of the Turkish Language Association. Especially with his contributions on the Trabzon dialect. He is also significant because his poems can be found everywhere on the gravestones of Maçka. Kudret Emiroğlu, the grandson of Ömer Hikmet Karahasanoğlu and son of Aycel Karahasanoğlu, continued the tradition of contributing to the language and literature of the region. I am talking about Kudret Emiroğlu's The Trabzon Maçka Etymological Dictionary. He also publishes a journal called Kedikeç and has released important translations from English to Turkish. Subutay Hikmet Karahasanoğlu, the son of Ömer Hikmet, is also an important figure when it comes to the culture and arts of Karahasanoğlu family and the region. He was a lawyer by profession, graduating from Ankara University's law school, but he also published poems extensively in journals across the country, including Kıyı, a literary journal that has been published in Trabzon since 1961. Subutay Hikmet Karahasanoğlu is listed in Behçet Necati'nin Edebiyatımızda İsimler Sözlüğü, Dictionary of Names in Our Literature, under the names Kul Hikmeti and Aşık Hikmeti. My family, really supported me throughout my education. I was a good student from the very start, even in primary school. My dad ran his own small business. He used to bring fabric from Istanbul or seeds from Samsun and sell them in Trabzon. In his 30s, he tried doing business in Istanbul and Sakarya, but things didn't work out. So he returned to Trabzon. My mom worked for years as an art teacher at the public education center and in various schools in Maçka. When I was in primary school, she actually worked just next door. She taught young women in Maçka how to sew and do embroidery, and she even organized a few exhibitions. She also enjoyed reading newspapers. So this is up to primary school, preschool, my family. And
when was the first time you realized that you're interested in history?
I guess it's maybe around secondary school, because maybe in primary school I realized that I was interested in social sciences because my older brother Tarkan started studying at Istanbul University's law school. Before that, I thought I would probably become an engineer or something like that, but after he went into law, I started leaning more toward the social sciences. So I should say Tarkan starting law school had a big influence on me choosing a path in the social sciences.
How did your family take it that you decided to go to history and not become a businessman or an engineer or a lawyer? Well, maybe just like your brother. Was it something that was taken well, or perhaps they tried to convince you that maybe you should do something else, more practical?
I was really confident that I would pursue an academic career. When I learned that I got into Hacettepe University's history department. So after I learned this, I was very confident that I would do an academic career. But during high school, I had a prep year in English, and I really enjoyed working with languages. In the second year, I seriously considered taking the national university exam in the language track. But over time, I started leaning more toward the social sciences, either literature or history. Eventually, history took the lead. I gave up on the idea of studying Turkish language and literature and decided to go for history instead. And I made my university choices accordingly. I got into Hacettepe University in 1997 through the national university exam. Hacettepe, located in Ankara, the capital city, was and still is one of the top universities in Turkey.
I see that in Turkey the educational system is rather similar to the system that is common nowadays in rest of Europe, with bachelor and master studies. Can you explain about this national exam? How did you actually get accepted into the university? What did this exam include, in fact?
It includes math, science, social sciences like literature, history, religion, geography, and that's it, I guess. Math, science, and social sciences.
So it's quite a broad examination in order to study just, just if we can put in quotation mark history. And
But
then
you don't have to answer many questions, let's say in science, if you want to do history.
so it's adapted based on your goal.
Yes. So that's why you have to decide you had to decide, I'm not sure about the system today, but in my time, you had to decide in the second year of the high school to do science or social sciences or language.
And during the studies of BA, bachelor studies, could you tell a little bit about the directions that you could have pursued when you studied history? In my education, we had four periods, and eventually at the end you could choose a specialization of a certain historical period, but not really specialization of a topic. So I chose the early modern period, and eventually continued doing the masters afterwards, also in the same time. And how was it in Turkey?
I guess in 70s and 80s, that was the system. So our professors graduated within that system. They were choosing medieval period, early modern period, modern period. But in my time, it was just history department. So there was no period, certain periods to specialize.
So you mentioned that you already were set on an academic career early on, and I wonder, what about military service? Was there obligatory military service at the time in Turkey?
Yes, there
Or
is, but if you are a student, you may postpone. You may postpone. So BA, MA, PhD. So I had enough time, and after PhD, I never did military service because I paid for it. You know, there was an option to pay. So I
Mhm.
paid. You know, so I didn't do that. I didn't do military service.
I understand. Well, it's just interesting because in some countries you can only get exemption if you're studying. In other countries you have to serve in any case. And in others you don't have any military service. I was just wondering how it worked in Turkey. And I see that for your master studies you actually changed university into the Middle East Technical University, the METO, but also in Ankara. What motivates you to make the change?
Because I didn't want to study at the same university because I had already enrolled in enough classes with the professors, with the faculty members at Hacettepe University. You know, I thought that, you know, it would enrich myself. It would enrich my education and career, you know, to study at a new university. You know, at the time when I was at Hacettepe, you know, the most influential professor in the department was Ahmet Yaşar Hoca, you know. So, and I would say that, you know, he had the biggest impact on me. So, under his influence and with his encouragement, I began learning Arabic, which marked the beginning of my long journey, you know, with the language. During my undergraduate years, I studied Arabic at several places: Ankara University's Faculty of Theology, Gazi University's Language Education Center for Civil Servants, and finally at Ankara University's Arabic Language and Literature Department, where I took classes with Professor Rahmi Er. Even during my PhD studies in the United States, I kept up with Arabic. I took advanced Arabic courses with Professor Kevin Lacey and Taysir Al-Juma in the Department of Classics. Before I talk about Matthew, I have to say that, you know, Hacettepe's history department was really strong. You know, I didn't want to continue there, but it was a really strong department. Our professors had been trained at some of the world's top universities. You know, Özkan Izgi earned his PhD from Harvard. Bahattin Yedi Yıldız from Sorbonne, Ahmet Yaşar Ocak from Strasbourg, Mehmet Öz from Cambridge, Ramazan Acun from University of Birmingham, Oktay Özel from Manchester University, Yunus Koç from Sorbonne, Güneş Karamuk from Zurich, Mürüvvet Kurhan from Aix-en-Marseille. So, as you can imagine, we were learning from a faculty educated at the very best institution. It was a rich blend of perspectives. So admittedly, not having all professors from a single academic school sometimes made things a bit complicated. But in the end, it was also a great advantage. While there were different scholarly approaches, the dominant influence seemed to be the French school of historiography. The department was originally founded in 1971 by Professor Ercüment Kur'an. He was a graduate of Saint Joseph and trained in the French tradition. So looking back now, 28 years later, nearly 3 decades, I can say this. One of the defining features of this department was its strong emphasis on historical methodology. So after that, I switched to Matthew. When I transferred to Matthew, I encountered a completely different academic environment this time with professors who were mostly trained in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, either in the United States or the UK. At Matthew, I had the chance to meet Professor Isembike Togan. She is a Harvard graduate and was a student of her father, Zeki Belidi Togan, as well as Francis Cleves and John Fletcher.
It sounds like you had a very stimulating environment around you that was actually promoting your own interest that you already had and stimulating you to develop further. And that brings me to my next question, because after finishing a master's degree at Matthew, you went all the way across the sea to the United States. And I wonder, how did you choose the university? Well, maybe first of all, why did you choose to study so far away from Turkey? Why not Europe? And then how the choice was made to go and study at the State University of New York?
Well, I wanted to pursue my PhD in the United States. Sure, I could have done it in Turkey, but I wanted to see different places. It wasn't just about education. I also wanted to experience everyday life and cultures outside of Turkey. The US was a great place to meet people from all over the world. So how did I choose SUNY Binghamton? There were many universities in the United States, some of which were excellent, but I needed to choose schools that offered a PhD program in Ottoman history. At that time, in the early 2000s, there weren't many options in the United States, but there were still quite a few. There were prominent scholars like Cemal Kafadar at Harvard, Cornell Fleischer at Chicago, Devin Döviz at Indiana Bloomington, Gabriel Peterberg at UCLA, Hamit Algar at Berkeley, Gabor Agoston at Georgetown, Ahmet Kara Mustafa at the University of Washington in St. Louis, Linda Darling in Arizona, and Donald Quarret in Binghamton. I think that was it. Major universities had Ottoman history programs, but smaller universities like Tennessee, where Pelmar Bramut taught, didn't have graduate programs in Ottoman, Turkish, Middle Eastern history. I also don't think Madeline Zilfi at the University of Maryland was accepting doctoral students at that time. Princeton was, of course, an important center with a long tradition in Ottoman Turkish studies, but it wasn't the best fit for me because Şükrü Hanioğlu focused on the later period of the Ottoman Empire and early Turkish Republic. Whereas I was more interested in the late medieval and early modern periods. There were also a couple of schools in Canada, like Toronto, where Victor Ostapchuk was teaching, and some of my friends applied there, but I didn't consider applying to any school in Canada. I made several applications, and in the end, I was accepted by the University of Chicago. I really admired the scholarship of Cornell Fleischer. In fact, I went to Chicago a year before applying and met him personally. At that time, I wasn't able to receive a scholarship from the school. At that time, students from Turkey couldn't get scholarship during their first year at Chicago. They would work in the museum or library during their first year, struggling to finance themselves. This would have been very difficult for me. Another school I was accepted to was the State University of New York at Binghamton. There, I had the opportunity to study with Donald Quarters, a prominent figure in Ottoman economic and social history. There was also Rifat Ali Ebu El-Haj, whose work was just translated into Turkish, Formation of the Modern State. So both professors were well known in Turkey. So I was familiar with them. Quarters co-authored a book with Halil İnalcık called An Economic and Social History of the Ottoman Empire, published by the Cambridge University Press. This was probably the book that made him most widely recognized in the field. Almost all of Quarters' books were available in Turkish. His research focus didn't overlap much with mine, as he was a labor historian with an interest in the 19th century. I, on the other hand, was interested in late medieval and early modern periods and wanted to pursue cultural history. Over time, we found a middle ground. I moved a bit closer to his focus, and he moved closer to mine. So together we decided that I would write my PhD dissertation on material culture and consumption in the early 18th century Istanbul. So that's the brief story.
I think that it's quite a challenge to go so far away abroad and live in a completely new country, even if you visited before. So I wonder, how did you feel about living in the States? Living inside the scientific career, but just on personal level. How was it for you to leave your family, friends behind and embark on completely new endeavor?
It was a great experience for me, I met people from all over the world. I had friends from Korea. I had friends from China, from Japan, from India, from all over. I had professors from all over the world. Binghamton University's history department was very strong. They had professors from all fields, They felt that they have to cover areas from all over the world. Whenever they couldn't hire somebody for a certain, region of the world, let's say United Kingdom, they would hire somebody as adjunct, So they would cover all over the world. I had two minors to accomplish comprehensive exam. I had two minors. One minor was with Professor Fatih Fan on consumption studies, and another minor was on Qing China with Professor John Chaffee. So it was a great experience for me, I can say.
And at the end, you finished the PhD. Didn't you think about maybe trying to stay in the United States to get a job there and settle, at least for some time?
Yeah, that would be an option, but I had my position ready at Denizli, at Pamukkale University. So it was not much logical for me. It didn't make sense for me to struggle there to find a job. It was not that easy, to apply for positions as an assistant professor or to find a position as a postdoc, because I had my position at the Pamukkale University's history department. It was the easier and faster way for me, for my career.
So maybe you could tell a little bit about that, how the situation was created that you already had a position before you accomplished the PhD.
Actually, it goes back to my master's years. While I was doing my master's at Matthew, I also needed to find a job. I was keeping an eye on research assistant positions at universities. So actually, in the meantime, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs opened a position for an archive specialist. I took the exam and was selected. I worked very briefly at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs archives, where I was involved in the classification of documents related to Germany. I didn't stay long, as my main goal was to secure a position at the university. During this period, Pamukkale University in Denizli, a city in the Aegean region, announced an opening for a research assistant position. And after that, after going to United States and completing my PhD, I was appointed as an assistant professor. So I didn't begin there as an assistant professor. I actually started my career at Pamukkale University as a research assistant.
I see. Well, that's, I think, very wise. It was very wise of you to prepare in advance. I think that it's an advice that many people can have, that even if they're going for a PhD, they should already start thinking about a job well in advance.
So I defended my dissertation in December 2008 and returned to Denizli, where I was appointed as an assistant professor and started teaching immediately. While I was there, actually, I published my first book.
That's quite remarkable, I must say, and also remarkable that you've done everything on time. I think that maybe we should mention to our listeners that in Turkey, you finished school education at the age of 17, a little bit earlier than, in the rest of Europe, because I think mostly nowadays, at least, it's 18 or even 19. So you had 2 years advantage above some people who finished a little bit later. And eventually, nowadays you are a professor, full professor at the University of Medeniyet University, Istanbul Medeniyet University.
Yes.
And you are also the dean of the Faculty of Letters. So I must say that from leaving the academic career aside, but the university career is very well developing. And I wonder, what do you think were the key qualities that you needed in order to achieve this progress? And I must say it's quite rapid. Within 15 years, you achieved full professorship and also the position of dean.
Yes. So the academic promotion process in Turkey, it's a bit different from how it works in the United States. I know, during my time in the States, I had the chance to observe for the academic career track there. So at least to some extent, so I can compare it a little bit. From what I saw, things typically go like this. Once people finish their PhDs, they move on to turn their dissertations into books. The key thing is getting that book published by a university press. If it is published by a prestigious press like Cambridge or Oxford, that really helps with securing tenure. In Turkey, on the other hand, once you complete your PhD, you are expected to produce new independent work to qualify for docentlik, the equivalent of tenure or associate professorship. The idea is that your PhD dissertation earned you the title of doctor, but to earn a new title like docent, you need to do new research. But the philosophy is basically one piece of work shouldn't count for 2 titles. A new title requires new merits. I had published a book related to the 1730 rebellion, my first book, which was somewhat connected to my dissertation topic. But it wasn't a direct extension. It was more of a source edition. My main habilitation, my main docentlik work, however, was my book, Kadı ve Günlüğü, The Judge and His Diary. With this book and a few other works alongside it, I received my associate professorship in 2013. That's the story. And
how would you advance to full professorship?
Yes. In Turkey, after becoming an associate professor, there is a mandatory 5-year wait before you can apply for full professorship. I wanted to spend part of that period doing research abroad, So I applied for a research grant from TÜBİTAK and went to Germany and stayed there for a while. You don't have to publish another thesis like docentlik, like habilitation, but of course you have to do some publications for full professorship, but there is a 5-year wait before you can apply.
It's quite different from what it is in Poland, where I am at the moment, for example, because for habilitation you need to produce either a cycle of publications or a book, and then after 5 years, you can actually apply earlier, but most people do it 5 years and more, you need to produce another book. So a big book,
For full professorship.
for full professorship. So it's quite a complicated process, and you also need to have, as far as I know, 7 reviewers of that work. So it's quite a large thing, and eventually the title of the professor is given by the president. So it's probably much much more different than in most of the countries that I know of. And
As
then
far as I know, in law schools in Turkey, there is a separate book. The candidate has to publish a separate book to become a full professor, but not for history. So different regulations for different fields in Turkey.
I think that for the very last question for now, I would like to ask you, what holds the future? Where do you aim at now?
I do projects. There is a project going on. I study ego documents. You know this. And so I went to Berlin first as a TÜBİTAK fellow, the Scientific and Technological Foundation of Turkey, and then as a Humboldt fellow. I did some projects, on ego documents, and I organized events, like 4 events called Ottoman ego documents, and I'm the chief editor of a journal called Ceride, Journal of Ego Document Studies. I work on this, and my TÜBİTAK project is still going on, It's a 3-year project, and it's set to finish on March 1st of 2026. So I'm working on those projects. So I continue to work on ego documents.
Well, I find ego documents a fascinating topic, and I have read some of your work on that. And I find it also remarkable that the idea of ego documents spreads in beyond the European context, even though initially probably it was not meant to go beyond that. So I'm very happy that the idea is spreading also into Turkish sources, and I hope that at some point, or maybe it already has, into Arabic sources and Hebrew sources, and where not. So I hope that you will also participate in some events that are organized by the International Documental Network, of which I'm part, but that's a separate topic. So I would like to thank you for this conversation. I think it was very interesting, and you gave us a lot of insight, not only into your own life, but also into the way that the Turkish academia works. And so I would like to thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mikhail, and I wish you good luck with the first International Documental Network Conference next week.
Thank you very much.